Hello, I'm Voltaire Tupas. Welcome to Rappler Talk. It's the season of giving. There are many ways to share our blessings, but one way is to help refugees, people who have been forced to flee their homes because of violence or because of war. But first, let's talk about the stories behind the moving images that we're gonna show in a while. Kasama natin ngayon ang isa sa mga multi-awarded journalist ng kanyang panahon at advocate ng UNHCR, ang UN Refugee Agency, Araullo. Welcome to Rappler Talk.
Ang formal mo, Volts, Thank you.
Seryoso ang ating pag-uusapan.
Oo.
Kagagaling mo lang sa Bangladesh at nakita natin yung mga photos mo sa Instagram. Maraming pumuri, maraming na-shock. Can you tell us more about those moving pictures, images which you posted? Let's start with the first one.
Right. Well, for everyone who's tuning in right now, if you want to take a look at the photos there in my Instagram account, it's at Araullo. But yeah, the first image is near the border crossing in Anjuman Para. This is near Myanmar. We were on the Bangladesh side. And what you can see is actually what's called no man's land. So dito sa no man's land, it's already part of Bangladesh, but it's a very controlled space because it's too close to the border, and the border guards don't want any security incident with Myanmar, who has a military presence near this area. But it's one of the most popular ways of getting into Bangladesh for refugees because the river in this area is very shallow. So yung mga refugee na Rohingya na tumatakas mula sa Myanmar, dito sila nagpupunta para pwede nilang lakarin na lang yung ilog. So when we were there, when I took this photo, there was a group of around 800 refugees who were staying in Anjuman Para for a few days because they needed clearance from the Bangladeshi officials to actually cross and go to the refugee camps, which are in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. So I snapped this photo as they were doing the crossing, and you can see the refugees bringing all of their belongings, well, whatever they could bring with them. In fact, sa lagay na yan, sabi nga ng mga humanitarian workers doon, marami na silang dala ngayon, mas nakakapaghanda na sila, pero nung una silang lumikas, bandang August 25, maraming umaalis na walang-wala talagang dala. Not even a bottle of water, not even a blanket or any cooking implements, nothing, because it was that crucial to find safety at that moment.
Kilalanin natin yung mga Rohingya. Alam natin, according to the UN Refugee Agency, yung UNHCR, around 600,000 na yung lumikas.
Around 620,000 by now, yeah.
Yeah. Let's zoom into their situation doon sa napuntahan mong refugee camp. Sino exactly yung mga Rohingya? Ano yung mga nakita mo? What did you see? Who are they when you met them?
I want to begin my answer by saying that the definition of the Rohingya is also a political matter. It lies at the heart of their situation because depending on who you ask, they will give different answers. From the point of view of the Rohingya, we want to give priority to how they define themselves and how they call themselves. So they call themselves Rohingya, and they are an ethnic group which is based in Rakhine State in Myanmar. They are predominantly Muslim, but there's also a section of them which is Hindu. And they've been living in Rakhine State for several centuries. I think that much is established, at least since the 1700s when the British first colonized this area of South Asia, including Myanmar.
Pero hanggang yun, sinasabing sila ay stateless. How is that? How has it become the case?
It's really a complicated issue, and I encourage people who are tuned in to do their own research. But as far as I know, the Rohingya have been around in Rakhine State for several centuries, like I said. And may mga nagsabi they were there even before the British colonized Myanmar, but definitely when the British came, and since Bangladesh, India, Myanmar were all part of the British Empire, madali yung paggalaw ng mga tao mula sa iba-ibang territories. And there was a big population that came from South Asia that settled in Rakhine State. Now, the problem is, ever since Myanmar earned or got their independence in the 1950s, there's been deep discrimination of the Rohingya, and they were never granted citizenship. In the beginning, there was a way of granting citizenship, but it got progressively harder to do that until finally it became almost impossible. So a lot of the Rohingya right now are stateless, meaning sa Tagalog, wala silang bansa, walang kumikilala sa kanila bilang mga mamamayan.
Walang nationality.
Which makes their plight doubly hard because aside from being refugees, hindi sila kinikilala ng Myanmar. In fact, Myanmar's position is that they're not even Rohingya. They consider them Bengali, meaning they're migrants. They don't consider the Rohingya part of the ethnic groups in Myanmar, and that's why there's also this deep discrimination that these people experience.
Because you're doing a documentary for Eyewitness, and I understand you've spoken with many of the refugees. Ano yung nasasabi nila sa yung mga naramdaman nila sa ganitong sitwasyon? While you were there, I understand the ASEAN summit was being held. They talked about the issue pero walang accountability. According to analysts, yun ang hindi nila pinag-usapan. Pero anong sense nila on the ground sa pamahalaan ng Myanmar?
We tried hard to get into Rakhine State, but I understand the security situation isn't very good. So what we did instead was to go to Bangladesh and go to the refugee camps and talk to the refugees. And even though we weren't able to see with our own eyes what was going on in Myanmar, their stories are shockingly consistent. And they tell the story of violence, of their villages being burned, of some of the men being killed, men and women, violence sa mga bata. There's also accounts of systematic rape of the women. And then of course, this restriction, hindi sila pinapayagang makapagsaka, makapangisda, wala silang access to education, to health. So it's a terrible situation that they're experiencing. And we saw footage that the Rohingya themselves were able to take using cell phones. And it's quite clear that una-una, kitang-kita naman na sunog talaga yung mga bahay nila. Tapos may mga kuha rin na people in uniform, which they say are members of the Burmese military na sinasaktan yung ilang mga Rohingya, and they're fleeing to the mountains, to the rivers, to the seas, just to get away from these places, and they're doing it for their safety. So imagine, sino ba naman ang gugustuhing umalis sa kanyang kinalakihan na halos walang dala para magpunta sa isang bansa na wala kang dalang pasaporte at manirahan sa isang refugee camp. So obviously they are experiencing, if not violence, persecution in Myanmar.
Sa dami ng narinig mo, nakita mo, anong nag-move sa'yo sa mga images na yun or sa mga kwento na ibahagi sa'yo?
Yung mga kwento nila halos pare-pareho eh. Halimbawa, I met this mother who was forced to flee Myanmar with her 2 children. Her husband was called to a meeting, allegedly by the Myanmar military, and he never came back. And then after waiting for 13 days of her husband never returning, she decided to leave when the adjacent village was burned. So in the dead of night, habang tulog daw yung mga nagbabantay sa kanila, she left the house and she wasn't able to bring anything, not even clothes for her children. So imagine this mother, hindi naman siya kalakihan. May 2 anak na bitbit na walang damit, and then they had to trek through the jungle. They had to beg for food from their fellow refugees, and it took them more than 2 weeks to finally cross the border. And I think even though obviously their situation is dire, we have to look for the ways in which they are resilient and courageous, because they are unbelievably brave to do this. More than any, more than any situation I've been in, I think this is one of the most difficult situations to be in, and to be able to persevere like that, and to fend for your family, and try to establish a new life in a refugee camp, and despite everything, have hope that one day they'll be able to return to their country, hopefully free from persecution or discrimination, hopefully safe. They look forward to that day, and
But as we
it
speak,
gives you some perspective.
the United Nations is saying that it's not yet safe to return to their homes.
Well, that's because the exodus continues. There are still refugees coming in by any means. Yung iba naglalakad, yung iba sumasakay ng bangka, yung iba gumagawa ng makeshift rafts, yung iba lumalangoy, may dala-dala lang na flotation device. And there are still accounts of villages being burned in Myanmar. In fact, you can see it. If you stand close enough to the border, in a high vantage point, you can see smoke rising from some communities. So we assume that this is because these places are being burned. So given this kind of situation, and without, for example, there are no independent observers and even humanitarian workers that are given free access to Rakhine, at least it's negligible. So we need that kind of presence there to ensure that if the refugees do return, it will be under safe circumstances, and that they can really rebuild their lives free from persecution. So it is the right of refugees to go back, and of course they want to go back. Most of them do, but we have to make sure that they can do so in safety and dignity.
Now the question is, why is this important to Filipinos? Kasi in 2015, naalala ko, kinupkup natin, nagpayag tayo na handa ang Pilipinas na kupkupin yung mga Rohingya na pupunta sa atin, kung pupunta sa atin. But this time around, why is this even more important?
Alam mo, magandang tanong yan. Napapansin ko na may mga nag-aagam-agam nga na ba't pa tayo kailangan makialam sa issue na to, and I understand them. We have a lot of problems in the Philippines. In fact, Marawi conflict is just coming to an end. There's still some clearing operations being done, I assume, or I've been told. But there are a lot of Filipinos who were displaced in that conflict. They're still in evacuation centers. They still can't go back to their homes. And so on and so forth. Parang marami tayong mga problema dito. Now, I just think that we have a capacity to engage in all of these issues and not necessarily have to shut ourselves out from what is happening around the world. In fact, it's important to understand what's going on around us, not just in the Philippines, so that we have an idea of why things are happening and how they are interconnected. It gives us a better understanding of our own problems. So that's one, definitely we have to address issues in the Philippines first, but we have a large enough capacity to think and to empathize and to help, that we can do that while still keeping in mind the plight of others who are persecuted elsewhere in the world. Pero dagdag pa dun, ang mga Rohingya, ano yan eh?
Sige.
Okay, there are questions.
There are questions na, yeah, continue.
But yeah, ang mga Rohingya, yung kanilang karanasan ay hindi kaiba sa naging karanasan na marami sa mga kababayan natin na binagyo, naging biktima nga ng ng labanan, ng karahasan, at sa mga pagkakataon ngayon, nakikita natin kung paano tumutugon yung buong mundo, tinutulungan tayo. So sa ganitong pagkakataon, ano ba naman yung makiisa tayo sa mga iba pang inaapi bilang alam natin yung pakiramdam at bilang isang paraan din para maresba ka ng isa't isa, di ba? Pag may mangyaring ganito sa hinaharap, halimbawa sa Pilipinas, sana wag naman, maasahan natin yung tulong mula sa mga mamamayan ng mundo.
Clearly, hindi ka lang isang storyteller, isa ring advocate, and in fact, you're an advocate of the UNHCR. Can you tell us kung ano yung mga challenges na kinakaharap? Mayroon tayong question kanina sa Twitter on the challenges that the UN is facing with regard to its humanitarian intervention on the ground. Anong nakita mo doon ng mga challenges na kinakaharap ng mga UN agencies doon, UNHCR in particular?
Well, you know, I remember one of the senior staff of the UNHCR said that the Rohingya have nothing and need everything. And I was able to see that with my own eyes. So definitely they still need humanitarian assistance, life-saving assistance. Hopefully humanitarian actors are able to enter Myanmar unrestricted, just so they can give help to people who need it there. I think we are still working on that. I mean, the international community is working on that. But in terms of needs of the refugees who are already in Bangladesh, they still need, of course, basically food, water, medicine, non-food items, for shelter, for protection. All of this has to be done on a sustainable basis kasi mukhang matagal pa sila dun eh. I mean, I want to be optimistic and say that it will be resolved soon, but we're talking about 620,000 refugees since August 25. And remember that a lot of the Rohingya have also evacuated, have already fled since decades ago, since as early as the 90s. So halos umabot na sa 1 milyon ng populasyon ng mga Rohingya sa Bangladesh. So it needs our sustained attention and our sustained assistance. Yeah.
May dagdag na question si Sunday Rose na anong tingin mo sa pag-accept ng country natin sa mga Rohingya kung sakaling mapunta dito? Can we accept them as refugees?
Well, I don't make the decisions,
I mean,
obviously.
is there a need na, based on anong sense mo sa mga humanitarian
Well, let me say,
actors
first
there?
of all, that the Philippines has a long history of being there for refugees and people in need. During the Second World War, we accepted refugees coming from some European countries, the Jews who came here. In the 1990s, we were open to Vietnamese boat people who were fleeing the war in Vietnam. And yes, we made that declaration in 2015 that we will be open to Rohingya refugees. There will be challenges for sure. The Philippines is a developing country, and a lot of Filipinos also need help. You know, marami sa atin ang naghihirap, nagiging biktima din ng iba't ibang sakuna. Pero
Just like Yolanda, you've
obligasyon
seen-
natin yun eh. Bilang mamamayan ng mundo at bilang, sabi nga nila, isang paraan para masukat kung gaano kaabante ang ating sibilisasyon ay kung gaano kalaki ang ating puso para sa iba at kung gaano kalaki ang ating kakayahan na tumulong.
That's a nice quote.
Yeah, let me just say that Bangladesh is also a developing country. They are 163 million Bangladeshi living in an area that is half the size of the Philippines. So they're the most populated country in the whole world. They're also one of the most severely affected by climate change. Grabe yung mga baha dyan.
And yet they're absorbing the...
And yet they're absorbing these refugees. Of course, there are challenges. Of course, things can still be improved, but they've done a lot. So the Philippines can also do that if we choose to. And just declaring that the Rohingya will be welcome here is a big deal already. Of course, I don't think there are Rohingya arriving just yet because the Philippines is a bit far from Rakhine State. But we have to be open to that.
For those who would like to help, anong exactly yung mga pangangailangan na nakita mo doon na kailangan maibigay sa kanila, sa kagyat?
Um, I mentioned some of the things that they need: food, water, medicine, non-food items. But aside from that, also protection, um, making sure that even when they are in the refugee center, they're not taken advantage of. Um, they're living in in, in decent temporary shelters, and they are able to maintain their dignity. So all of that needs support, um, not just resources to buy all of these necessary assistance, but also making sure that the right people are there. You know, humanitarian workers on the ground. It's a big operation, so you know, for people who have something to give, I encourage them to make a contribution to the UNHCR. The UNHCR is doing important work not just in Myanmar but also in the Philippines. Remember, there's still the Marawi conflict that we have to address. So if you have a little extra, especially it's Christmas season, maybe you can make a contribution to UNHCR. If not, just continuing the discussion is important. Uh, Although this is described by the IOM as the biggest humanitarian disaster in the world currently, a lot of Filipinos, I think, are still not aware of it. So just being aware of it and following closely the events, um, and then perhaps going further by making a definite call or making parang a plea to our leaders to do what they can to address this issue is, I think, it goes a long way already.
Ikaw, as far as you're concerned, may tanong si Lance Saavedra on Twitter. Anong magiging next step mo
Well,
para matulungan sila maliban sa iyong advocacy?
Yeah, my work is primarily as a journalist, as a broadcaster and host, and we are putting together a story in GMA 7, Eyewitness. It's airing on December 2. This will be my first story for Eyewitness. It's about the Rohingya. So we're hard at work putting that together and to make sure that we are able to discuss the issue well. And to answer that very important question, why should we care? Why should Filipinos care? It might sound tactless, but I think it's a legitimate question given all of the challenges we have here. So that is a challenge for me as a documentary documentarist, to kind of try to answer that question.
Anong maasahan ng mga viewers sa latest documentary mo? First, in fact, sa Eyewitness on GMA.
Well, I have. We went to Bangladesh. We went to Kutupalong camp. We went to Cox's Bazar, the border. So it's a first-hand account of what's going on there, and they will see through our images the situation there. And we talked to a lot of the refugees, and more importantly, to the humanitarian workers. Lalo na yung mga Pinoy. May mga Pinoy na nandun. One of the senior members of UNHCR, Mr. Alvin Gonzaga. Yeah, Alvin Gonzaga is from the Philippines, and he's been working with UNHCR for almost 3 decades. And kitang-kita mo yung talagang yung sakripisyo, yung pagmamalasakit, at meron ding mga Pinoy na nandun. Sana nga nanonood sila. Yung mga members ng Filipino Grand Alliance of Bangladesh. These are OFWs based in Bangladesh who had a fundraising to have a distribution of relief goods in Cox's Bazar. So Filipinos are helping, and it's very inspiring.
Okay, sa Marawi naman, dahil nabanggit mo yung Marawi, bumisita ka rin sa Marawi. In fact, sa mga areas around Marawi, kung saan may mga evacuation centers. Can you tell us your experience? Anong mga nakita mo namang pangangailangan ng mga internally displaced families?
Aside from the things that I mentioned, which at this point are pretty basic, their basic needs, sustaining them in the evacuation centers, I think one of the most important challenges right now is their security. Mindanao is still under martial law, and unfortunately, these internally displaced people tell us that it makes it difficult for them as well because they were forced to flee Marawi. They weren't able to bring any identification. And this is something that struck me the most among the many things that we talked about. It's that difficulty of going, as simple as going to the grocery, to the market. Natatakot sila dahil paano kung mahuli sila, wala silang identification, baka mapagkamalan pa. I hope that this is addressed because, like I said, hindi lang naman emergency needs ng mga IDPs ang kailangan natin tugunan eh. Kailangan din natin tugunan yung kanilang mga protection needs. And beyond that, support them as they rebuild their communities. That we have yet to see because there hasn't been a general return to Marawi. There are some barangays that have been cleared, but obviously the main battle area is still dangerous. So hindi pa talaga makakabalik yung mga nakatira doon. Pero pag nakabalik sila, dapat hindi rin natin makalimutan yung mga pangangailangan nila. And given the extent of the damage in Marawi, I'm sure that this is something that will take a couple of years.
Well, you've seen the devastation in Leyte nung Yolanda at nakita mo kung paano pinamunuan yung relief, yung recovery dahil sa mga stories mo. Anong mga lessons from Yolanda na pwedeng nakikita mong maganda ma-apply sa Marawi? Kasi basically halos ganun yung model nila ng recovery in terms ng structure o ng mga task forces na binuo para matugunan yung recovery phase.
Well, I'm not sure if this will be totally applicable to Marawi, but in Leyte and Samar, there was talk of resettlement. That was a big issue because we don't want the survivors to undergo or to go through that kind of ordeal in the future if another strong typhoon hits their area. But one of the things that they told us was that it was difficult to resettle if the places where they're going to don't have the necessary support. What kind of support am I talking about? Schools, health centers, places where they can earn a living. So people have a tendency to go back to where they came from kasi andun yung mga trabaho nila. Alalahanin natin na walang silbi ang relocation kung hindi ka rin mabubuhay doon. Kung hindi ka rin makakahanap ng mga pagkakakitaan. In Marawi, I'm not sure if resettlement is a big issue at this point, but that's one of the lessons that we learned.
Yung magiging challenge nila, the way I see it, ay yung temporary shelters kasi mukhang matatagal lang makabalik kasi nga nag-clearing pa yung military. So doon, alam naman natin pag nandoon sa mga temporary shelters or kahit sa tents, maaring yung susunod na mga problema ay yung health, yung sanitation, water, yung mga ganyan.
That's true. Actually, you hit it right on the head. Temporary shelters are meant to be temporary. In some cases, yung temporary shelter halos naging permanent na rin eh. And minsan napapabayaan yung sanitation. And then, you know, as the temporary shelter falls into disrepair, it's up to some of the IDPs to find a way to fix it, which is, of course, it's part of picking yourself up, di ba? Parang being responsible for yourself. But if nawalan ka talaga at wala ka, kailangan talaga ng constant support and monitoring on the side of officials, public officials.
We've talked about the refugees, the Rohingya refugees, and then the Marawi IDPs. Can you give us the distinction? Anong ibig sabihin nun sa mga
well, ang
normal
basic,
na tao hindi alam yung details?
One basic difference is that refugees have to cross borders and IDPs or internally displaced people do not. The Rohingya are considered refugees because they have to cross the border to Bangladesh or in some cases Thailand or Indonesia or Malaysia. In the Philippines, yung mga Maranao, yung mga nakatira sa Marawi at iba pang mga ethnic groups doon, they don't have to leave the Philippines to flee from from violence. So they're considered internally displaced people. Although we've had some refugees in the past. I don't know a lot about it, but during the fighting in the 70s, um, some people from Mindanao were forced to flee to Sabah. And those are refugees because they had to cross borders. They had to go to Sabah, which is, um, well, that's also a controversy, but it's part of Malaysia. Um, so that is the basic distinction between the two.
Okay, 6 years ago, when Move was just starting, in fact, before Rappler was born, Move pa yun, we had our first conversation and you talked about your views on journalism and activism. Sabi mo noon, I remember, ang journalism ay maaring maging catalyst ng change sa isang lipunan. 6 years, noon pa yan. So ngayon, how did it change? How did you evolve?
Wala na, nagbago na yung pananaw ko.
Ito na ba yung manifestation ng ganong perspective mo? I mean, hindi ka ba nahirapan? Journalist ka, at the same time, meron kang advocacy.
It's an open discussion. Depending on who you talk to, they have different opinions on how journalists should approach a story and what their role is. And they will have good points and valid points. As far as I'm concerned, I always try to look at the basic question first, the most important question, which is, what is journalism for? Journalism on the outside is basically telling people about what's happening right now and explaining the news. Those are two things, not just telling people what's happening, but also explaining what's happening. And to what end? For me, it's not just to keep them informed, because you have to go beyond that. Why do we have to keep them informed? Because people have to be informed so they can make the right decisions. And what decisions are those? Those are usually decisions that affect our future, not just our future individually, but also the future of society. And as journalists, we have that responsibility of inspiring people to act for the better, obviously. Alangan namang for the worse. So, in that sense, journalism, although it's not directly an advocacy, it is part of our DNA. In many instances in our history, important moments in history, journalists have been at the center of this huge change because we told the right stories, and there was courage to tell these stories, and it inspired people to act. So while it's also new for me to be so open about these advocacies, but at the same time continue my work as a journalist, I think that the intersection is useful. I'll give you an example. Climate change. Having covered stories that touch on the issue of climate change, including disasters, disaster risk reduction, you're left with no other conclusion except to say that climate change is a terrible phenomenon that we have to do something to address or to adapt to. It sounds like such a universal position, but in other countries, this is not as fully accepted. There's still a debate. But when we hear people talk about climate change as an advocacy in the Philippines, it's less controversial. And that's because there's a common consensus that this is the truth. Of course, some people will still disagree. But once you find the truth, then it is our duty to spread that truth and to bring it to its natural conclusion, diba? And journalists are truth tellers more than anything else. We're not just here to basically reflect what's going on, even if you know that it's it's not the truth. Then why do we emphasize that? So again, the important thing is going to the heart of the matter. And of course, we have to do that using our basic ethics, which is to present both sides equitably, not equally, but equitably, and make sure that we are transparent in the process and also being open to criticism.
But well, as you said, kasi yung challenge ngayon ay may disruption na siyempre, wala tayong monopoly ng truth telling. Of course,
For sure.
marami na yung ilang mga influencers, etc. Do you feel na nadidistract yung journalist ngayon sa noise ng social media sa kanilang task? Whether sa kanilang storytelling man yan or sa ilang advocacies?
I don't know. We'll have to ask them individually.
But you, as far as you're concerned, don't you feel distracted or disappointed?
No, not really. Social media is what it is, and it's not going to go away. We just have to learn to live with it. And that is something that we are all figuring out, not just journalists, but regular people. In the era of misinformation, I don't want to call it fake news, but misinformation or, siguro yung, yung divisiveness online. We have to stick to our guns, and also not be afraid to engage. But at the same time, acknowledge that, again, that's true. We don't have the monopoly of the truth. So, kailangan din maging mapagkumbaba ang mga alagad ng media na oo, minsan nagkakamali tayo, oo, minsan walang konteksto yung mga storya, oo, minsan may pagkiling yung mga storya. Tanggapin natin yun. Within our ranks, may mga nangyayaring ganyan. The sooner that we accept that, we can also be better journalists and kind of win the trust of more people and turn back the tide against those who would prefer to muddle the conversation with falsehood.
So as a journalist and as an advocate, how do you plan to set the tone of the conversation online so that yung social media ay magagamit?
Ang hirap na nito, Volts.
Hindi, wrapping up na.
Okay.
Paano gagamitin sa tama yung social media para ma-set yung tone ng conversation?
I don't have the answers. I'm still learning myself. For one, this has been discussed multiple times na naman. We have to think before you post something. Think before you click. It's become our responsibility. Dati, minsan di tayo nag-iisip like agad or share agad. Pero sa panahon ngayon, madali naman mag-check kung isang bagay ay mukhang totoo o hindi. Kung hindi tayo sigurado, huwag mo nang i-share. Dahil wala namang nalagay sa kapahamakan dahil hindi siya nag-share. Pero marami nang nalagay sa kapahamakan dahil nag-share sila ng hindi chine-check kung totoo yung kanilang pinapakalat. So that's one. I think that's one of the basic things that we should remember. And then also, stay critical. Not believe everything that we read or we watch on television. I think a lot of Filipinos already have a healthy level of skepticism, so that's good. Hindi naman dapat mawala yun. Pero kailangan natin mag-aral. At yung pag-aaral, tuloy-tuloy yan. Huwag tayong mag-assume na alam na natin yung mga sagot dahil sa ating sariling karanasan. Maaari yung karanasan natin ay hindi kumpleto. Meron pang karanasan yung iba. Tapos, siguro, panghuli na lang, pa rin, yung maging maayos ang pakikitungo sa kapwa. Kung paano natin sila kakausapin sa totoong buhay. Dapat ganun din sa social media.
And one way is to help them and use the platforms to help campaigns like yung share, a
that's
gift
one
of hope.
positive way of doing it.
As an advocate, paano to? How does this work? How can they help exactly using UNHCR platforms?
There's a website, donate.unhcr.ph. Okay.
Ipa-flash natin
Slash.
ito.
Okay, there you go. Hindi ko memorize, meron akong kodigo dito. So it's donate.unhcr.ph. So any amount will be gratefully accepted. Again, this will go directly to the operations of the UNHCR and to help those in need in Marawi and also those in need outside of the Philippines. But right now, we're also addressing the crisis in Bangladesh and Myanmar with the Rohingya. Again, this is obviously this is all voluntary. So if you have something to spare or if you have some amount to spare, then please visit that website.
Ang magbe-benefit yan ay both yung Rohingya at saka yung mga families displaced sa Marawi.
Yeah, primarily.
Yung campaign na to, buong buwan ng holidays to?
Forever ata ito, tuloy-tuloy lang to.
Okay. So, encourage natin yung iba na mag-donate. Nandiyan, flash natin yung links. Yeah, at saka mayroon kang parting shots, message sa kanila bilang isang UNHCR advocate.
Well, unang-una, let me just say na please support the documentary we're producing, airing on Eyewitness GMA 7. That's on December 2. So you'll see our whole coverage in Bangladesh in that story. So if you have time, please watch the documentary. Now, siguro last thing I want to say before we leave is, just trust in our capacity to care. Mga Pilipino, malaki ang puso ng mga yan. Hindi naman tayo kailangan pumili. Pwede nating suportahan yung mga kababayan natin dito habang sinusuportahan din natin yung mga ibang mamamayan na nakakaranas ng karahasan at pambubusabos. Hindi po yan dalawang bagay na magkatunggali. In fact, yung dalawang bagay po na yan ay nagtutulungan, complementary. So, just follow the story, keep abreast of the latest in terms of these issues, and if you have something to spare to help them out, then by all means, please share your blessings.
Well said. But we have to end this on a lighter note. May pahabol. Ano daw yung update sa Citizen Jake, sabi ni Dana Jean?
Nako, I can't really
Twitter.
talk about that at the moment. We'll have to leave that to the Citizen Jake team.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Atom.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Rappler Talk. I'm Voltaire Tupas.